So, how much does an adoption really cost? So, welcome back, everybody. Um, I wanted to take some time to answer this question, which seems to be the most common question that I get from people, other than, oh, you're adopting? Where are you adopting from? So, most common question is, how much does an adoption cost? Or how much are you paying for that thing? Isn't that expensive? Yes, it is expensive, and it depends the route you go on. There are lots of different options for adoption, and adoption can be almost free to costing like a year's salary or more, kind of depending on how much you make in a year. So let's start off with talking about the one that's almost free. So if you do an in-state adoption out of foster care, usually it's almost free. They will pay for the lawyer fees and the actual adoption fees. Now, you may still have to pay for a home study, paid to have, if you have to have a psychological evaluation or you have to do doctor's visits. Of course, if you have to get a bed for your child's room, you've got to get certain things for that child. So those things will cost money, but as far as the actual adoption itself, that can be as much as free. They'll pay for it. That's how it is in an adoption-friendly state, like Arizona is one of those. We live in Georgia, though, and they are not an adoption-friendly state. So any child that becomes part of, a ward of the state, they go into the foster system. It doesn't matter what state you live in. They all go into the foster system. And if you're a foster parent and then adopting a child, then that's usually more where you will get those adoptions that are paid for, even in Georgia. In Arizona, and I know there are other states like this, if you decide that you don't want to do foster care, you just want to go right to an adoption, then Arizona will still pay for the majority of that. In Georgia, they won't, though. Nope. That child's case moves to a different agency for the adoption. They're still in the foster system, and they may still be living with foster parents. But their case for adoption goes to a different system, and so that means now you've got to pay for lawyers, you've got to pay for a private adoption, plus all the other things. So when we had adopted our daughter from Colombia, and then we thought, oh my goodness, that was so much work and it was so expensive, let's just do an in-state adoption. So we started looking into it. And they didn't even want to give us all the information. I ended up talking to like 3 different agencies before they would tell us, before I could really piece together the whole story, which was unfortunate. But basically in Georgia, because it moves to a different agency and you've got to pay for all the things, it would end up costing almost as much as a foreign adoption in the end. Plus, the average time for a Georgia adoption that does not go through the foster system is 3 years. 3 years! That's insane. I mean, being in the military, we're not even sure if we're going to be here for 3 years. So we looked at our options and we thought, we know Colombia, yeah, it's expensive, but we know the situation. Our daughter is Colombian. She would love to have a Colombian brother. So we went back to Colombia. So that is Georgia's situation, and I know there are other states like that. I don't know, of course, the situation in all the states. I haven't lived in all the states. I haven't talked with all the states. But so when you decide, when you're looking at what kind of adoption you want to do, you need to call your state, call the agencies in your state to find out exactly what the story is. Okay, so those are the in-state adoptions and foster care adoptions that can be anywhere from free to really expensive. It just kind of depends. Okay, so then if we move over to foreign adoptions. Foreign adoptions, I have heard being as cheap as cheap as $40,000. And that might have even been like a few years ago. Our adoption, Stephanie, was it came out to being about $50,000 once it was all said and done. For Jose, we're looking at it being about 65,000. I think that our agency that we have now is a little bit more expensive, and things have just gone up, and we're having to redo things. It might even end up being 70,000 by the time it's done because of some of the things that we're having to redo. So, yeah, it just makes you kind of cringe, I know, but you know, it is what it is. So you might be thinking, oh my goodness, how can there be that many fees? What in the world are they charging us for? Well, it's a huge list, which I'm not going to show in detail here, but I'm going to read off some of the things that that they charge for that is part of all those adoption fees. So there's the agency fees. There's the dossier preparation review and processing fee, home study evaluation review and processing fee, Hague accrediting entity monitoring and oversight fee. Let's see, foreign fee, management and development fee, dossier translation and certification fee, child referral translation, administration and coordination. Let's see, and some of those, let's see, post-adoption deposit, because you have to do post-adoption visits. There are, I know for Colombia, there are 4 of them that you have to do over a 2-year period. Every 6 months, you have usually either your adoption agency or your home study agency, if they're 2 different ones. They will come and just do a visit with the child and see how things are going, and write up a little report that gets sent over to Colombia, and you'll send more pictures, so it's not that bad. Let's see, what else? Okay, so Colombia's new child's new Colombian passport, child's U.S. immigrant visa fee, USCIS immigration, required medical exam, lab tests, vaccinations. Yes, they have to show that they are healthy and vaccinated in order to enter into the United States. Child's authenticated court documents, new birth certificate, new Colombian ID, translation of adoption decree, and new birth certificate, round trip transportation from Bogota to La Mesa, and then back into the United States. Home study services fee. Pre-adoption parent education. Yes, you've got to take several hours of adoption education classes. USCIS I-100A filing fee. USCIS biometric fingerprint fee. Psychological report. Dossier document apostille. And all the other apostilles. Secure courier shipping charges. Parent adoption visa, post-placement visits and reports, hotels and meals for you and your child and whoever else travels with you. If you take your whole family with you, that's everyone, right? Airfare, child care fees, mandatory contributions to orphanage. Sometimes they require that you make a contribution to the orphanage, not always. Application for U.S. citizenship, and insurance of certificate, entry visa or approvals. And then sometimes there are some other fees, especially if you're adopting more than one child at a time, like a family group, then there will be additional things in that realm. So that's a foreign adoption, but I have heard of some foreign adoptions being 100,000 because, like China, for example, China and I think Haiti, if I remember right, you would have to go over to the country for bonding time, and I think you've got to be there about 3 months, and then you return and you keep working on the rest of the process at home, and then you go to actually complete the adoption. And I think there's one country, it might be China, where you have to go for 2 bonding periods, which means not only are you just paying for your living at, your regular expenses still at home, but now you've gone someplace for 3 months where you're paying for a hotel or a house or something, and travel, all these things that you're not normally paying for. So it just costs way more. So when you're looking into a foreign adoption and you're talking with agencies, you need to see, when you're thinking about different countries, talk with them specifically, like what is the average cost in this country and in this country, and what kind of things are required of us. Are we going to have to travel and live in the country for 3 months or longer in order to complete this adoption? And you want to talk to agencies as well, because not all agencies charge the same amount of money. I don't know if it's still happening. It was something that was happening in the past. But agencies would look at a family's finances, and if they had very good finances, if they made a lot of money, sometimes those agencies would charge those families more than a family that made less, which is super dirty and shady. But they said, oh, that way it evens out. That way, instead of our regular $60,000 fee, we can charge $80,000 to a family that makes more, and only $40,000 to a family that makes less. I mean, I can kind of, but it's still dirty. It's still dirty, no matter which way you slice it. Okay, so let's see. That's the foreign adoption, more or less, situation. Then you say, well, what if I want to adopt a child in the country, in the United States, and I can't talk to adopting, like if you live in Australia or you live in England and you want to adopt a child in Australia or in England. I have no reference for that. So this is within the United States. So maybe you say, well, I live in Georgia, but I want to adopt a child that lives in Utah or in California or in North Dakota. Normally that doesn't happen unless you are somehow connected to that child, like through family or friend or something like that. But when you do that, you have to have an adoption agency in your state and their state, and you have to have a lawyer in your state and their state. So it's almost like double adoption fees. Okay. The kind of adoptions that happen most often across state lines are babies. And I'm not sure why that is permitted more than other ones, but babies being adopted across state lines happens quite frequently. So, and a lot of people want babies. Maybe that's why. Maybe just the demand for babies. So, because that is the most sought after kind of adoption of a baby, it's important to know what you're getting into when you adopt a baby. And this is a big reason why we have decided not to go this route. But many times when you adopt a baby, now if you're adopting right out of foster care, if there's a baby that gets put into the foster system and parents' rights have just been terminated immediately, you can move forward with that baby immediately. Or close to immediately. But if not, if you just want to adopt a baby, and you can't always be guaranteed that you're going to get a baby in that way through the foster care system. It's so hit and miss, the kind of child that you will get. And really it just kind of is with adoption anyways. I think you have a little bit more control when it comes to just going through the adoptive process. But someone might argue that point with me. That's just kind of my opinion. Okay, so if you're not going through the foster care system and you want to adopt a baby, usually they put you on a waiting list. And I have heard of families waiting up to 10 years to be able to get a baby. And sometimes you're just on the waiting list until like a baby becomes available out of the foster care system. But many times, especially when it happens over state lines, what happens is that there are mothers in other states who are, they're pregnant and they decide they want to give their baby up for adoption. And so they will then essentially shop around for parents for their child. So what you will do then is you will get an agency, you'll do your home study, you'll build a binder that has pictures of you, information about you, all this stuff, and then those files, that binder, whether it's physical or maybe a digital binder, right, goes to those mothers, and they will go through all of them and look at all those pictures and read all the things about you. And they will essentially decide from that who they would like to be their baby's mother. And sometimes there is a meeting, like you get together and kind of have like an interview process. Sometimes not. Sometimes they just say, from those pictures, from that right there, I know that's my baby's mom. Okay, so when you're doing it this way, once a mother has identified the parents, the family that they want, then again, because most likely you're going to be in separate states, you're going to be paying for your adoption agency, her agency, you're going to be paying for your lawyer and her lawyer in the two different states. So not only that, but then there's just all the other things that you need to do for the adoption that you're paying for. And then there's also travel. You've got to be able to travel back and forth. But the big thing that you've got to watch out for is that many, many times you're going to be paying for that mother's doctor's visits, delivering the baby, sometimes a place for her to live, and sometimes food to eat and other bills while she is pregnant. And you might be thinking, what? Why would we do that? And the rationale is that, well, if you were the one that was pregnant, then you would be paying for those doctor bills. You would be paying for that housing and that food and all of that. So, okay, maybe you can rationale that and say, okay, I can see that. We'll do that. The problem is that on occasion, depending on the laws of the state, sometimes up to the date of birth, the mother can change her mind. And so you've paid for all of these things, and then the day that the mom has the baby, she changes her mind and keeps the baby, and you've lost everything that you have put into adopting that baby. There are also some states that have a law that even a few days, maybe even up to a week or two after the baby is born, she can change her mind. So in other words, you would have already taken that baby home with you. You would already be bonding with that baby, and then she changes her mind and wants the baby back. Super rough. I don't think I could live with that. I don't think I could handle that. So now that doesn't happen all the time. I don't want you to just be like freaked out, like, we're never going to do that. That doesn't happen all the time, and I think agencies do a lot to try to ensure that that doesn't happen. Because if it was happening all the time, then of course there would be rules that would change, and even though, I don't know, maybe they should change, but people would just stop wanting to adopt babies because they just weren't getting any babies. They're paying off for the mother's stuff and never getting a baby. So it is successful a lot of the time. But you need to go into it with open eyes that it is going to be expensive and it might not work out. So again, you need to talk with your agency. You need to really plan well. And I would even say go into it very prayerful and with your community. Yes, with your community to help support you and back you up. Okay, So those are more or less the costs of adoption by, depending on what kind of adoption you do. Now, there are some variations to that, and of course, there are different ways to help you pay for an adoption. Most people can't just pay for an adoption out of pocket. And I think I'm going to make another video that talks about some of those ways to be able to pay for an adoption, because you usually have to pay for the adoption as it goes. So it's not like you can, unless you take out a loan and then you pay on that loan. But the agencies, the lawyers, like all of the people, they want that money up front. So usually within a year, you've got to come up with this huge chunk of money, like $75,000, ridiculous, So that's that. But yes, if you have some kind of different experiences, please comment about them below. I would love to know kind of what your experience was with having to pay for your adoption. And if something that I said, you're like, what? I never heard of that, or that seems ridiculous, let me know. Because we all have different views and different experiences. So thank you for joining me on our journey to create an adoptive family, and I will see you next time. Bye.